Hello, my name is Alexander Gutkin, and today I'm going to talk about graphemic normalization of Perso-Arabic script. The talk is going to consist of 5 parts. I'm briefly going to introduce Perso-Arabic as a script, then briefly discuss 6 languages that are used to record the script, and followed by various techniques for script normalization, description of basic experiments, and conclusion. Perso-Arabic is used by about 600 million people and is used to record 308 living and historical writing systems. It's used for diverse language families, and some of the historically some of the attested adaptations are very interesting. It's been used to record Afrikaans and Malagasy in South Africa, Chinese and Japanese in East Asia, as well as Bosnian and Aljamiado in the Iberian Peninsula in Europe. The modern adaptations, of course, include the Dardic languages of North Pakistan, and Torwali is one of the better known examples. Multiple reasons for the spread of Perso-Arabic, of course, social, political, economical, and of course, liturgical. The cultures that accepted Islam also had to accept the script. And another reason, of course, is the flexibility of the script itself. The script evolved from Nabatean Aramaic through several existing North Arabian scripts, and eventually evolved in early medieval times into the script we know today. Cursivization is one of the salient features of the script. It's been aided by the advances in soft materials such as vellum, and similar to other Semitic scripts such as Hebrew, initially the letters only signified the consonants. The basic shapes were called rasm, or drawing, or shape in Arabic. And over the centuries, it evolved into a more sophisticated system that also indicated vocalization and other phonological processes such as gemination, using several mechanisms such as dots, known as ijam, as well as other mechanisms such as diagonal strokes, harakat for short vowels, glottal stop, hamsa, etc. So each rasm has several variants. Each variant is a standalone letter, and there are many productive ways of deriving a letter from a rasm. Each rasm may have, for example, using the ijam diacritics, might have up to 4 different letters deriving from it. And that's a very productive way of making new consonant symbols when the script is adapted to new languages. And adaptation examples are first of all, inventing, perfecting the vocalization system so much, consonant pointing and other mechanisms, so that the abjad essentially becomes an alphabet. And the prime examples of this are Kurdish languages, such as Central Kurdish Sorani, as well as Uyghur, and to some extent other languages with reasonably modern Perso-Arabic orthographies. Introduction of even more patterns of dots, additional diacritics, and new rasm shapes. So one of the examples is Urdu, where a new shape, two-eyed hey, was introduced to handle aspiration. Because the script is so flexible, there are many ways of, or several ways of, potential ways of representing a single letter. So, for example, there's one code point for representing aleph with madde above, and it can also be represented using 2 code points as a separate aleph and separate madde above, and both the final renderings are visually invariant. Of course, this results in presentation ambiguity, and Unicode offers some ways of rectifying this. One of them is the normalization form C, known as NFC. Initially, when Arabic was introduced into Unicode in 1991, it had 169 atomic characters. By now, there are over 440 atomic characters, which are of interest to our work. And it continues to grow. So many ligatures, for example, have been recently added. We next discuss 6 examples of productive ways in which Perso-Arabic was adapted to new languages. So we start with Urdu. Urdu has 230 million native and um, second language speakers, according to Ethnologue. It uses two sort of main styles: Nastaliq, which is a more traditional style, which was preferred, and Naskh, which is preferred on digital media because it's easier to um, um, it's easier to present in digital format. And Urdu Abjad, similar to other Perso-Arabic languages in South Asia, originally evolved from Persian, and Persian, of course, evolved from Arabic. So Persian plus Arabic gave Urdu around 32 letters. This 32 letter set was augmented in several productive ways. So new letters were added for retroflex sounds. And those derivations are very interesting. So for example, retroflex T was derived from Arabic te plus Arabic ta, where the two rasm shapes were actually juxtaposed on top of each other. In addition, new shapes have been added for aspiration marking, as we mentioned above, for the two height hey or hey do ashmi. New letter for nasalization, new letters for word final vowels, and much, much more. It's worth noting that those derivations, the new adaptations, in many cases were influenced by the style itself, because the way the letters were displayed possibly influenced the way those rasm shapes were composed with each other, or new ijam mechanisms were introduced. And officially, Urdu has 56 letters, but this is debated. Punjabi is very similar to Urdu in some respects, and in terms of a script. Punjabi has a similar to Hindi-Urdu divide. There's a divide between Western and Eastern Punjabi, with Eastern Punjabi using Gurmukhi script. Shakmukhi, which is the Perso-Arabic for Punjabi, mostly shares the inventory with Urdu, but there are certain additional letters, such as along with small ta above, which marks voiced retroflex lateral approximants, voiced retroflex nasals. But other than these two letters, overall, the Shakmukhi and Urdu are mutually intelligible as scripts. And also similar to Urdu, the precise number of letters is a matter of debate. In fact, there are 4 letters which some scholars claim are part of the inventory, but we have not detected those letters in our data. Sindhi, unlike Urdu and Shakmukhi, doesn't use Nastaliq, it only uses Naskh style. And the first inventory of Sindhi was standardized in 1853 by British colonial administration. The modern inventory is the biggest of the Perso-Arabic inventories that we know. Out of the survey, it has 64 letters, and it has offers some really unique adaptation features. So one of them is, for example, that in Sindhi orthography, the Hai Hamsa is part of atomic letters. It's never used independently with one ye and waw is used. So one for Urdu and Shakmukhi, one would use ye and Hamsa both separately. In Sindhi, the orthography mandates that ye and Hamsa both are used as a single code point. There are also 4 implosives, which are very interesting. They're sort of new rasm shapes. One of them is, for example, the dal with 3 dots above, downwards, which is an original way of using the ijam. Unlike Urdu, which marks sort of all the aspirates with tuait hey, in Sindhi, only 3 aspirates are allowed, and the vowel diacritics are not normally used, and they're only used to mark the short vowels. So it's more of an abjad in a way than Shakmuki. Next language is Kashmiri. It's the only Dardic language with surviving literary tradition, hence it's very important. Uses both Nastaliq and Naskh styles. It's much closer to alphabets such as Central Kurdish and Uyghur. Some of its unique features are it basically represents all the 16 consonants, grouping them into 8 pairs of long and short vowels. There's a special letter which is special to Kashmiri, which is ye with a ring below. There is aleph with wavy hamza above and aleph with wavy hamza below for representing the long schwa and long close central unrounded vowels. And the wavy hamza above and below are unique to Kashmiri. Another interesting feature is the use of sukun for marking consonant clusters. The use of sukun is not unique, but its shape is an inverted V, which is quite unique to Kashmiri. The next language is Malay. The Malay orthography, the Malay Perso-Arabic orthography is called Javi, and it's used to record Malay and also some small Austronesian languages of Indonesia. But Javi nowadays is primarily used in Sultanate of Brunei. It's an official script. Javi has a comparatively small inventory, only 37 letters, and vowels are usually completely unmarked, making it a perfect abjad. Similar to other languages, it originally derived from Arabic through Persian, and it has some Persian letters, such as che. Some of its unique features is full reduplication. So whereas in Rumi, which is a Latin orthography for Malay, you would simply repeat the noun twice, at least in old orthography, to signify the plural case. In Javi, you would prefix the noun in singular with an Arabic numeral 2. And there's a special vaw with dot above for representing the foreign loanwords, which have sounds which Javi doesn't have. And the final language is Uyghur. It's a Turkic language, which is now an official script. Perso-Arabic script is an official script in northern China since 1982. It's a proper alphabet, unlike the languages discussed so far. The vowels are explicitly marked. And as other languages, it also mixes Arabic letters and Persian letters. So, for example, there's a Persian Gaf for G. It has some unique features. There's a special velar nasal letter Ng, or N, for which is formed by Arabic Kaf and 3 dots above, and the rich vocalic system, which makes use of Wav-based derivations. Wav with superscript aleph and 3 dots on top and small v on top. And Wav in general is used very, very productively in Uyghur. I will next turn to normalization details. So as we mentioned above, there are multiple ways to represent letters and letter clusters. One of the examples that I give here is the 2 ways in which a letter aleph with mada above and hamza below. This representation would be equivalent to aleph with hamza below and mada above, and which one of them is correct, which is completely unclear, and NFC doesn't really help us with a lot of those cases because they're not implemented as part of Unicode. And so we turn to visual normalization. Visual normalization is a collection of transformations which are brought to some canonical form, and yet all these transformations result in visually invariant outcomes. The first group involves transformations supported by Unicode as NFC and NFKC as part of those standards. And those transformations include the NFC transformations that we mentioned earlier. Letter aleph and mada above is equivalent to letter aleph with mada above as a single code point. Reordering of combining marks such as shadda, sukun, madda, and others, and kasra, and then normalization of presentation forms. The second group of transformations, which are not covered by Unicode, are visually agnostic, visually invariant transformations, which are language agnostic. So for example, letter Y followed by Dhamma looks very much like letter U. Ideally, this should be brought to the same common form. In addition, there are language-specific rewrites, such as in Kashmiri, you want to rewrite letter Dal with round height stop with field center to letter Dal, because the earlier version is represents the older orthography when letter Tal was still not part of the Unicode. So we combine all of those groups in a single grammar, which we call visual normalization. There are 6 steps. We rewrite the presentation forms, then we use NFC rewrites, and then we do various positional rewrites followed by isolated letter rewrites. The next transformation is reading normalization. In certain cases, we need language-specific transformations that produce different output. And this are needed when we have several errors, which may be due to imperfect input methods, inadequate script literacy, where people use wrong letters, which come from foreign orthography, and older Unicode versions when we have documents with people using deprecated letters. And there are quite a few examples like this. So for example, in Sorani Kurdish and Punjabi orthographies, Farsi ye should be used instead of a ye, or in Pashto and Persian, KH should be used instead of a kaf. And of course, in each of those cases, the resulting transformation would produce an outcome which would be different from the original. Nevertheless, those transformations are necessary. The reading normalization is constructed from visual normalization plus composed with reading normalization proper. So for example, in Urdu, the alif with wavy hamza above is replaced with alif with hamza above because that's a valid Urdu use case. All of this is implemented in software in Isaba library, which is based on Painini. It's a Python library for finite state grammar compilation. And we have quite a few features in there, including, which in addition to normalization includes romanization and transliteration, language agnostic, and an initial stab at letter typology, which is the inverse index of letters pointing to languages. As an example, we currently we support 8 languages. The inventory of languages is growing. We've documented 179 letters for 59 languages based on ICANN recommendations. And we also implement 697 rewrites of presentation forms. Why the real data is complex? While working with the real data, such as Common Crawl, which is a huge sample of internet, essentially, we see a lot of uses of deprecated letters. We see a lot of uses of isolated or presentation forms within words, which is clearly an artifact of older keyboards or older versions of Unicode when some of those letters were not available as individual code points. We see a lot of zero-bit non-joiners. When something didn't render correctly, people tend to use zero-bit non-joiners or joiners. We see a lot of code switching, and we see quite a lot of confusables. One of the examples is when Aleph with Mada above is visually a bit similar to an Arabic digit 1 followed by Mada above. We performed some very simple experiments trying to figure out how effective are those normalizations and how to quantify this effectiveness. So the design of our experiments was quite simple. We took text corpus, ran the reading normalization of this corpus, and then randomly shuffled the corpora, normalized corpora and a normalized one, making sure that the test set is always unchanged, so it doesn't have any normalized text. And then for each of the 100 folds, we trained a statistical model and evaluated it on the test set. After the evaluation, we ended up with 2 sets of measurements, one on normalized text, one on unnormalized text, and then we simply perform statistical hypothesis testing, accumulating the results. For the data, we used Wikipedia for most of the languages. For Java, we used data from the web, from the scrapes, which I described in the paper below. The data still requires significant cleanup, even though it's Wikipedia, because there was a lot of noise and spam from Latin script, as well as text and other scripts, and a lot of redundant markup. We build regular character and word level language models. For character-based models, we built 8 types of models from trigrams to tangrams. And for words, we build 4 orders from bigrams to 5 grams. And we evaluated by computing the cross entropy of the test set, which is defined as how well the model describes the test set. So the lower the better, because the entropy is usually expressed either as bits per character for character-based models and bits per word for word-based models. And when comparing the results, we use 3 types of hypothesis testing. And the summary is as follows. For Java orthography, we got a very nice improvement, concluding that normalization is very effective. For Sorani, Kurdish, Shakmuki, Sindhi, Urdu, and Uyghur, we got small but statistically significant improvements. And for Kashmiri, the results were good for character level models, but we didn't get any significant improvements or degradations for word models, because the Kashmiri set is very, very, very small. So we couldn't train the statistical models reliably. And to conclude, we very partially touched on some of the complexities of the script. We did see that essentially each adaptation resulted in each language having its own script. And we also saw that the script normalization operations are quite effective for most of the languages that we tested. And we also hypothesized that such normalizations would also benefit the downstream NLP processing task. And for the future, we'll need to increase our coverage, introducing new languages, and running more experiments in more NLP experiments, such as building machine translation systems or training sentiment analysis classifiers. Thank you very much, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions from online? Okay, thank you, Alexander.
Thank you.
Thank you.